Hi everyone. So I just saw something online recently. It was a necklace and it had the Fehu, I think that's how you pronounce it, sigil mark on it, which I thought was really, really cool. And decided that I definitely had to get me one of those. Um, and I was just watching a video too. I can multitask. I can online shop and watch videos. Um, that Kellyanne, the Four Queens, was doing. It was a video from like a long, long time ago that was on her witchcraft and paganism playlist. So if you guys want to go find it, like go for it. It's in there. But she was talking about the craft and this need that people have for like material items. And like of course like right after this I found this necklace and I was like I have to have it. And I've been just doing that a lot lately with just all the different things that I'm learning about and wanting to incorporate into my practice and into my craft. And it's just so exciting and I want to surround myself with it. And so I've been like looking things up on Etsy, which is really awful because they don't have free shipping. I'm like 90% certain, and everything is outrageously expensive, which it should be because it's handcrafted and blah blah blah. But my wallet simply cannot sustain the amount of things that I want on that website. Um, but like I've been looking, like I said, the necklace. I've been looking at some prayer beads. I really want to get some prayer beads. Um, and I just bought a tarot deck. So like the things that you want when you go down this path accumulate very, very quickly. And there is that kind of divide between the people who are like, well, you don't really need items and things like athanes and pendulums and whatever it is, because all of your power is really in your mind, and if you just visualize and whatever. And then of course the other people who are like, well, but we like things, and I kind of sit in that crowd. Um, and I think it really stems just from the fact that so much of our lives consists of doing things that we don't really want to do, and it really sucks. So much of our lives are, going to work, going to school, if you're still going to school. Um, I can tell you that my life is pretty much like 70% school and work, and then like the other 30% is do whatever I need to do, and even that's filled up with like homework or, um, looking up information about the college that I want to transfer to, or like whatever it is, getting new glasses, like things. Time it gets filled up by things that you just don't want to do, and so things are nice to have sometimes when you're sitting in bed and working on stupid math problems, and you can look over and see, you know, the um, the incense holder that you just bought that has little stars and suns on it that make you think of Hecate or like whatever it is. Like, it's so nice to just be able to look up and to have these objects that, even if you're not using them then, can kind of take you out of your head into that mystical place. And it's in regards to anything, everything, even those things that are outside of the craft, just things that you like really enjoy, your favorite color, your favorite incense, your favorite candle, whatever it is. It can, just like glancing at it can really make you feel much better. It's a little tiny bit of beauty that can remind you that the world is not just a bunch of drudgery, and things that you don't like and don't like to do. So I think that they can be important. I don't think you should get bogged down with them, with this idea that you have to spend a bunch of money in order to be successful at whatever practice you have going for yourself. But it can definitely be a very good thing, I think. And it always gets me so much more excited, I think, in the long run. If you have something to look forward to, like something is coming in the mail. Like I said, I have a deck of tarot cards coming in the mail, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to digging in and like understanding them more and getting better at reading people's tarot. Um, that's all very exciting. So if you have those things that are tangible that you can look at and think as like reminders of, well, maybe I should sit down and pray at my altar or meditate, or maybe I should pick up the cards and study them a bit more, like whatever it is. Like it's a good reminder, just in general. So I like things. I'm pretty happy with things, and I'm gonna keep on buying things because they make me happy. Um, there was something else I wanted to talk about that just sort of popped in my head, so I wanted to talk about that real quick. But the other thing just kind of left me. Oh, so I haven't made a video in a while, but I've been doing some reading for a little while there. I was very into some I guess, crafty kind of literature. I had read The Spiral Dance. I read the Rebirth of the Goddess by oh man, I forgot what her first name is. Christy Christ, something like that. Man, I wish I could remember that. I'll go grab the book in a second, maybe, and show you guys. But it's definitely called the Rebirth of the Goddess, and I will talk about that in a moment, because that book I really actually enjoyed, and I hate that I don't remember what the author's name is. And then I also read a book by Hilda Davidson. I think that's what her name is. Of course I can remember that one. But that book was basically just about the Norse myths, and it wasn't like a retelling of the Prose Edda or anything like that. It was a very like bare bones introduction to these gods and their stories and lives, which is really what I wanted, because I know a lot about Greek mythology, and I think that comes just from it's so much involved in our culture. The Renaissance has really leaked into pretty much everything that is modern day. Like, that's where we've come from in a lot of ways, is the Renaissance. Those new ideas of humanism and art and science and yeah, all that stuff. So we do get a lot of Greek mythology in school, which is great because I love it. I do follow Aphrodite and Hecate, and I just love that stuff. But there's so much more in the world to explore, and I did get like a feeling that maybe Freya would be a really good goddess to start speaking to, and of course I have, and I'm really excited about that whole relationship that's developing there, and finding out who she is. It's different from what I had with Aphrodite, because like I said, I had already known so much about Greek myth that it was less of a learning process and more of a it was a process of deepening that knowledge, really, because I already had a very firm basis to build my relationship with her on. And of course it's much deeper now, it's more complex, and I've added my own ideas and my own personal feelings into it. So it's much different in a lot of ways from maybe how I perceived her to be before I really started looking at sources outside of the things like the Iliad and high school English classes, or like whatever it is. So yeah, but I did read that book, and I know a lot more about the Norse myths than I knew before. I actually just recently bought the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson, which I'm excited to get into. I'm a little bit apprehensive about that, just because I know that he was Christian, and the very beginning is basically like, it basically says, look, everything that you're going to read in the story is like a bunch of bullshit. Like, there's one true God, and here's who it is. So, he comes out and says that he believes that the gods that were the heathen gods actually came from just mortal humans who were just heroes and were really strongly acknowledged at one point. So, you have to kind of go into things like that with an open mind. And it's going to be... The frustrating thing with it is that I am really interested in Freya and of course the other Norse goddesses, but there's so little information out there about them. And I actually recently posted something on my blog about it, about like some of my ideas with that, and it's coming from a very ignorant point of view, just because, like I said, this is really my first time really digging into those stories and trying to understand them. But I think that as humans, we just naturally, instinctively have this feeling of knowing when someone is lying to us. And I felt like when I was reading those stories that Hilda had sort of retold, that there was something about them where we weren't getting the whole information. Of course, we know that, but feeling it is something different. It's understanding that the stories that Snorri Sturluson wrote, and he may not have been the one to have initially skewed them to be these kind of patriarchal, sexist, Christianized retellings of these myths. It could have been something that was happening for a long time. Certainly, the earlier you go back into history, the more matriarchal it is, and the more goddess-centric it becomes. And for so long, by the time the Snorri Sturluson got to those stories, they had already been pretty bastardized just by the own people, the original people who created it, who had just over time become more patriarchal, over time just become even more Christianized. Like it kind of shot the horse in the face before he even got there. It was already dead and decomposing and pretty much bones by then. So I don't blame him too much. And we gotta take what we can get. But when I read stories like the one where I think it's when one of the giants tricks, he doesn't really trick them. Like he's really honest about it actually. Where he says, "I'll do this thing for you," and I think it's like building a wall or something like that. I forget exactly what it is, but he does something for the gods, and they tell him, they're like, "Look, if you do this for us, you get Freya's hand in marriage," which is like bullshit that they did that. She's a fucking goddess. Like she'll marry whoever the fuck she wants to marry. But he ends up completing that, and then they're like, well, shit, like, why the fuck did we promise him that? That's so stupid. And so, instead of, like, being upfront with him and like, tell him, like, look, we're not gonna do that, they dress Thor up as a woman. And this is, like, one of the stories that came later, and as the later stories are a bit more, funnier and comedic, and probably were not exactly what the originators of these myths intentionally wanted, though of course the Nords were the people who loved to laugh and drink and blah blah blah. But yeah, so Thor dresses up as a woman, and he sneaks into the wedding party and is about to get married to this guy, and Loki of course is helping him, and instead of, I mean, Freya is still there, like she's still in the picture, but instead of her actually taking this position that Loki takes and helping Thor, which she's totally capable of doing, Loki actually takes her cloak and uses it, and that's pretty much like his only role in the story that I remember. Maybe there's more to it. I'll have to read the prose edit and see if there's more to that. But I remember thinking that. I was thinking, well, but Freya already had the cloak, and she was known for wearing the cloak, and she was more than capable of using it. Why was Loki written as the one who used it? How does that make sense? It just seems disingenuous to me, almost. And I have no proof to say that, well, maybe Freya was, like, the original user of the cloak in that story. You'd have to find actual documentation proving that, which so much has been lost time. But like I said, I think just as humans, we have this natural feeling of knowing when someone is lying to us, when someone is omitting the truth. And I definitely felt that then. I felt like there was more to the story that I was not being told. These goddesses are so prevalent in not only the history of these Nordic people, but even in present day. Their imagery is ubiquitous among all of those countries. Their names, Freya's name is on like every single street name in Sweden, especially south of Sweden, which is where my ancestry is from that, by the way. So it seemed disingenuous to me to think that she would have had no role in that, more so than she was said to have had. So, yep, that's just a little tidbit. And it's just really exciting just to get to know her. So I'm just having a lot of fun with that. But outside of really specific gods and goddesses, I read this story, or not this story, this nonfiction book called The Rebirth of the Goddess. And I think her name was Krista P. Christ. I remember her middle name, P. And then Christ was her last name. So I'm sure you can find out The Rebirth of the Goddess if you guys want to read it. She's very well known and prevalent in this goddess religion, the modern goddess religion. She was actually an editor, I think, and she might have even wrote an essay in it, A Woman's Spirit Rising, which I want to read. It has a few essays by Starhawk and Alice Walker. Yeah, Alice Walker, who wrote The Color Purple, which I just read, and that was great. So if you guys want to read that, go get it, because it's awesome. But like I said, I had read The Spiral Dance before I read The Rebirth of the Goddess, and there was a few moments in The Spiral Dance where I was like, yeah, I guess I get it. But for the most part, I was just sort of like nodding my head and trying to push through it. There wasn't a lot that was very inspiring to me. I'm not really into the whole Wicca thing, which I think Starhawk is. I don't actually know if she ever came out and said that she was Wicca, but she has a lot of the same ideas in regards to like the Lord and the Lady, masculine and feminine energies, drawing the circle and things like that. And I mean, I get that people respond to that. I don't really respond to it. I think part of it is I don't like the idea of organized religion just in general. And Wicca, in some ways, certainly in other ways, it's different from, how we're used to organized religion. But it is like a kind of a big name religion, where you have people like Gerald Gardner developing traditions and taking on initiates and developing covens and as individuals, of course, they can develop their own ideas, personally. But when they're in that circle, it does get kind of melded down into one kind of Wicca, and other people respond to that. I don't really, and that's part of the reason why I didn't care for the Spiral Dance that much. The other reason is just I think that Wicca is very simplistic in a lot of ways, to me anyway, especially in regards to their ideas of like the Lord and Lady, and their relationship to each other in general, like the rebirth of the god and this like complex mythology. And I get that like all myths are made up to an extent. In some way they're part of the phrase just left my head. The something conscious. I don't remember. But in a lot of ways they're like just a part of all of us. They're these stories that come naturally just from the human experience, and in a lot of ways they aren't real, or at least they can't be proven to be real, or exaggerations maybe, or like whatever it is. But there is a history to those myths. There is a tradition to those myths that I think gives them power. There is a connective force between being a modern practitioner of something and understanding that perhaps your ancestors practiced that same thing or something similar, and felt something similar. It's very powerful. But modern myth, I don't know. I just don't respond to it that well, I guess. I almost feel like who are you to tell me that this is how it is when you have no proof? Like, who do you think you are? I feel like I would almost trust someone who had lived a while ago more so, just because in theory they were so much more closer to the origins of the universe. No one is really all that close to the origins of the universe, but maybe the origin of the wellspring of original human thought or something like that. I don't know. I'm really not sure. I don't know why really it rubs me the wrong way so much, but it does. And the idea of like the Lord and the Lady and like Maiden Mother Crone, I think so many of those ideas are really old and cisnormative and heterosexist and all these different words, sexist in a lot of ways. Like, I just don't abide by this idea of there being this strict binary between masculine and feminine. I think that they overlap a lot, and I don't necessarily even think of feminine as being strictly related to women or masculine being strictly related to men, but as these like kind of vague terms that really just are placeholders for all these different types of personality traits that anyone can acquire. And when I think of just like the people that I know and the people that I've come across on the internet and how they live their lives and what I understand of sexuality and of gender, I just don't think that the universe would be as simple as so many Wiccans seem to paint it as through their mythos. So yeah, that's really why I didn't really respond to the spiral dance. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say about that before I move on. I like her. She was a pretty cool person. I like this idea of all the things that she's doing in California. I really like the idea of like California witchcraft. It really gets me into the spirit of like the craft, which is just like my mind and soul and body. I am the craft. And I just like this idea of like the juxtaposition of like sunny Cali weather and like the dramatics of witchcraft, with all the black and candles and things like that. But also I think California in general is just like a very spiritual place in a lot of ways. I'm picturing it right now of like the rocky crags, over the ocean and the sand and just like how beautiful it is. I used to live in California when I was younger, and there is no weather like California weather. It is almost godly. So I don't know, witchcraft in California just makes sense to me. And I like that idea of like what she's doing over there, just like with creating these groups of spiritual innovators. And I want to be a part of that. So, I mean, more power to her. I just love that she started when she was, I think, either in college or out of college, and she just felt like, there has to be something has not been created yet, and I'm going to create that for people who are like me. So that in a way, the spiral dance is really great for that. There was a lot of things about her beliefs that just don't gel with me, which is, fine. The rebirth of the goddess, though, which is what I really wanted to talk about, because that's where I really did find a lot of inspiration. A lot of it was very nature-based, with the ideas that she talked about. And I remember like reading it, and it was like 7 o'clock in the morning because I had to go to work, and I had to be at work at like 9 o'clock or something like that. It was like pitch black outside. The birds were singing, and I was reading this passage about, I think, her trip to Greece and just being part of the nature there and feeling so connected to the goddess. And I kept hearing this bird getting louder and louder and louder tweeting. And suddenly there was like knocking on my front door, and he was like right there. And I just had this like huge feeling of nature like coming in. Like really experiencing it coming in. I don't know how else to describe it. Like I don't know, like there was like this connection between me and like the outside. I don't know how to explain it, and it's probably just stupid, but I don't know. It just, there was so much in the book that I responded to in that way, as if it clicked, as if it made sense. There was the thing with it that was kind of annoying was, and it's just like a small thing. She made a very like I've been saying like a lot in this video, but she made a very valiant attempt at being like trying to be inclusively feminist, or I forget what the term is. I guess that would work, inclusively feminist. She talked about Alice Walker a little bit, and basically just like black women involved in the goddess religion, which is fine. Like I'm all for the inclusiveness of everything, just to make it all inclusive, and try to be as comfortable, or try to make other people as comfortable as possible, and feel like they're accepted, and for all their differences and similarities and everything like that. But at one point she compared being tall and being made fun of for being tall to being black, and people being basically racist towards you. And I was like, I don't know about that. It just seemed very naive in a lot of ways. Her relation to, I guess, that aspect of feminism of being inclusive. So there was like some cringe-worthy moments. I don't know if you guys will necessarily get that when you read it, but if you read it. But like I just read The Color Purple, and like I said, she brought up Alice Walker in the Rebirth of the Goddess, and I think she actually quoted a passage from The Color Purple in that book too. A passage where one of the characters, Shug, talks about God and what God feels like to her, which of course is like a very powerful statement that she makes in the book. But when you read all the different things that all the characters go through in The Color Purple, which are really traumatic and sad and brutal, and of course some happy ones, but like the very beginning is just like, man, like how are people actually going through this? Because these are stories that exist, that people actually live through. It's not just a fictional world that Alice Walker is creating. She's pulling from real life to create something that is fictionalized but very, very real and very true. You can't read that and understand, or try to understand, the desperation that those characters must have for God, for the idea of God that is accepting to them, when so much of the world is unaccepting, and then compare it to you being tall. Just, that doesn't make any sense. So whatever. She doesn't really go into that too much in the book, but it just seemed kind of garish to me, and like it just really struck out to me for some reason. But yeah, the biggest concept within the book that really resonated with me was this idea of goddess as a concept. If you watch some of Kellyanne's videos, and a little bit of Anya Orga's videos, if you've seen her, I've talked about her before, they do talk about this idea of archetypes. And Kellyanne, I'm pretty certain, has said, and don't quote me on it, like, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty certain that she said that she doesn't technically believe that these gods and goddesses are real, and I'm on the fence about that a little bit. I'm not really certain what I believe. You can't really prove anything. I think that human thought is really powerful. I think the idea of other dimensions are really powerful. This idea that technically anything could exist in any dimension, or any universe, or like whatever it is. And so in theory, any of these gods that we talk about when we talk about mythology could exist somewhere. So I'm on the fence about that a little bit. But she believes that they exist rather as archetypes, and because these archetypes are so connected to just human experience and human feeling, they have that kind of power, and if you meditate on them, if you work with them in that way, they can have really life-changing effects. And that they all kind of, speaking specifically about the goddesses, tie into this idea of the divine feminine, which is almost all-encompassing, difficult word to say, so late at night, all-encompassing aspect of the goddess, which is a very, like, almost pantheistic way of looking at things. And I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well. But almost as if these archetypes are just aspects of the goddess, which is, to me, really, after reading The Rebirth of the Goddess, is just a concept. It's understanding that we've come to a point in the world and in our history where we've lost so much of our connection to this idea of the divine feminine. So many of the goddesses have been ignored and diminished. through history, through the rise of the patriarchy, if you want to get dramatic, that it's cut us loose from the ties to the feminine aspects of ourselves, which are not necessarily feminine. They're just aspects that we've, as humans, applied to the feminine, applied to women, and decided that, men can't fill them, and because they have to be strong, and if you want to be strong too, like men, then you have to divorce yourself from these feelings, which are really just things that we should all be feeling because they're just a natural part of being humans. And if you want to live a healthy, natural lifestyle, like, you better start, like, getting used to your tears and to caring, because otherwise we're all going to grow up and shave our heads and pierce things, and yeah. So, like, yeah, where was I going with that? I don't remember now. But yeah, concept. Because, we don't really know what's real, but I like the idea of using goddess, because in theory God could be anything. He could be male, or she could be female, or it could be something that doesn't look anything like we've ever seen before. It's otherworldly in a lot of ways, for lack of a better term. But when you say that you believe in the goddess, it immediately strikes you as different, as outside of this God religion, which is at first dramatic and will get people's attention, but also I think represents just this feeling of loving nature and loving connection and striving to know more so you can be a better person and to help people. Because I think that is, or really should be, the ultimate goal of any kind of spirituality, is just to be a better person and understand things better and be more compassionate towards other people. And I think most pagans would believe, or would say that for themselves, that that's what they're trying to do with their religion. And so even if the goddess doesn't exist, by using that term and by imagining the goddess and feeling that divine feminine energy in a very almost tangible way, you are in effect doing something that's wholly different from what God religions are doing, for better or for worse. So in general, I don't know if I explained that very well, but in general, I just, whether or not the goddess really exists, using the term goddess to express my religion is almost a really good shortcut of getting a point across, which is that I'm a huge hippie, basically. But yeah, so it was just a really interesting book. I don't think I explained it very well. It's been like a couple weeks since I've read it, so a lot of the ideas have disappeared. I'm trying to think if there's anything else about that book that I just want to get across real quick. I don't know. It was honestly like reading something out of my own head sometimes. It didn't seem, I think sometimes with books like that, it seems a bit gimmicky, or unrealistic, or is this someone just like pulled it out of their head? But like, you could really tell that she had thought of it and that she had consulted fellow scholars and people who are like her, of all different religions. She had a lot of quotes from some Jewish women who are really making some strides in seeing men, or seeing God as a woman, or as something other than man within that religion, the Jewish religion, which is interesting and revolutionary. So yeah, I don't know, it was cool. And I really want to get Woman Spirit Rising. There was another book that I think Kellyanne mentioned, which was Voices of Light, I think, which is a book of poetry that, of like different poems by different women about God and like how they feel about that. So that seems really cool. I think I want to get that. So yeah, so that's my video for tonight. Just thought I would let you guys know what's been on my mind lately. I haven't done it in a while, but hopefully this has been interesting for you guys. Yeah, have a good night. Bye.